My name is Rosalie Anders, and I'm the president of the Massachusetts Peace Action Education Fund. And I'm so happy we're all here. And I have to say, I'm so grateful to the program on negotiation. They did so much to help us make this happen, and they've just been way above and beyond the call of duty. Even though she is my sister, she's great, and the rest of the staff. We have some unfortunate news that you probably saw that Professor Noam Chomsky was here. He became ill and he had to leave just a few minutes ago. And so, we can think about him. And I was going to introduce him, and I'll just say that I saw that in one biography, he was called, quote, a figure of enlightenment and inspiration, unquote, for political dissenters and activists, and I'm sure that includes many of us in this room. So, let's hope he's okay. And I'll just say one other thing. We'll have Michael Mcpherson, who's I'm really looking forward to hearing. And then afterwards, we'll have time for a Q&A and some discussion, maybe with the other panelists too, since you didn't have a chance to ask questions of them. And I also have a housekeeping matter. This was found, and I don't know whose it is, but come and get it. Okay, so Michael Mcpherson. He is the executive director of Veterans for Peace. He's a veteran of the Persian Gulf War, and his military career includes 6 years of reserve and 5 years of active duty service. And he's done a lot of social action, including for 3 years as national coordinator for United for Peace and Justice, the national organization. He's a member of Military Families Speak Out, and he's co-chair of the St. Louis Don't Shoot Coalition, which was formed in the aftermath of the police killing of Michael Brown Jr. in Ferguson, Missouri. He publishes the online Mcpherson Report, and he's launched an effort to ignite a new conversation about Dr. Martin Luther King's message and what it means to live in just and peaceful communities. So Michael will speak now, and then maybe we'll open it up for questions from Michael and the others.
Thank you. Thanks. So first thing, I didn't expect, obviously, to be speaking without Noam Chomsky. So I was already intimidated, speaking with him, now speaking without him, and with knowing that you all primarily were here to hear him, come on now. I mean, that's why I came, okay? I don't know what to say. I'll just do the best I can here. Well, thanks. Thanks for the cheering up and all that. So I do want to say that the panel before this one was really incredible. And yeah, let's give it a big hand. And there were a lot of awesome framing and ideas brought to us that we obviously need to be thinking more deeply about. And I think some of the things that I have prepared as remarks weave very well into what was being said. One thing, there's a few things I want to say before I actually go into my prepared remarks. One thing that Cassandra said, I was thanking her for her comments, because I think if we really look at what this global system, not just the one we have in this country, but this global system is doing, it is trying to make us into something, and some of us even more so. So for the African American community or people of color, black people specifically, the mass incarceration is probably the most acute example of making us into materials to make profit off of, to use in certain ways. And so in a way it makes us forget who we wanted to be. And when she said at the end that she remembered who she wanted to be when she was a little girl, and now you see that person right now, we have to realize that's what's being done globally. And when we look at young men and women in inner cities, or, and now I'm talking about predominantly black men and women, but even white kids in Appalachia, or when you look at young people that are in ISIL, and I say ISIL instead of ISIS because ISIS is a goddess, and I'm not going to defile her name in that way. It's the same thing that's being done all around the world. So I just wanted to say that what we're trying to do is allow people to be people and allow people to wake up so they can be who they should be. So I just wanted to say that. The other thing is, we talk about capitalism a lot, and we should. However, I think it's something even deeper than that. I think that is patriarchy is the center of the problem. And I need to say that because I think as men need to think about the role that we play because, right now this global system, and I'm not trying to diminish the impact of capitalism, but, capitalism really isn't that old of a system. You know what I'm saying? It's not really that old. And many, if not all, of the issues that we're facing were around before capitalism. Maybe not as intense and maybe not as systemic, I don't know, because I wasn't around then. But they were there. But patriarchy is very, very old. And interestingly enough, this, I guess, confrontation or conflicts are really between mad men. They're not between mad men and women. They're between mad men, and women are used as material in this conflict. So we really need to think about that as men and what that means and not always try to push everything on capitalism. We need to think about what role we play as men in this. And another thing I wanted to say about us being here at Harvard Law School, which, that is, I guess, ironic, or, there's something wrong about it, but in some ways there's something right about it, because it might mean that we're a little closer to that place we need to be to make the change that we want, because we are in a place like this. At the same time, you have to be careful, because one of the things our system does is can lull us into believing that it's more just than it is, because we're kind of close to power or whatever. So there's good and bad about it, and I just think that we should be aware of that, because it provides opportunities that we need to take advantage of, but not allow it to lull us into something that's not real. So, thanks. Well, so I guess so far I'm doing pretty good. So, all right, sustainable security. I think that if we are looking for a way to build sustainable security, that the most important components of this security are relationships. What are we building security against, and what are we trying to protect? The answer is people. So if we are protecting people from people, we must understand that people must be incited and propagandized to hurt and kill each other. Fear is how you demonize to dehumanize, and dehumanization is central to war. Today, ISIL is using tactics of dehumanization, and we know our system, I say our system, the system we live in, uses those tactics, and I just talked about that. Mass incarceration is part of those tactics. ISIL is using tactics of dehumanization or creation of the other to build its caliphate. It is also attempting to force the other or us to hate them so there can be a violent confrontation on their terms. The question before us today is how will we react as a nation and world to this strategy of creating fear, dehumanization, and blocking of building relationships. And I thought I would use them because of obviously what happened, 8 days ago. And since that time, all we've been hearing is a constant drumbeat of war. Nothing about peace and trying to break down this march to war. So I thought it would be important to at least address that. And most important, what will we as peacemakers and justice seekers do at this critical moment? If we are to build sustainable security, we must first believe peace is possible. Because if we do not, We must believe war is inevitable, which then follows that we will either be at war or in a state of preparing for war. That may have worked at one time, but today with the weapon systems we have at hand, nuclear proliferation that will continue if war is believed to be the inevitable norm, and the fact that common objects such as planes can be used to kill thousands of people or small arms to disrupt and terrorize whole cities, the cycle of war and preparing for war is not sustainable. Most important, we cannot effectively advocate for peace if we ourselves do not believe peace is possible. If you make these shirts, make it with a capital F, because the reason we're veterans for peace, we're not veterans against war, we're veterans for peace. And our corporate, I'm sorry, we are a corporation. Our corporate name is with a capital F, not a small f, and there's a reason for that. But people say, what is that? And I tell them it's Veterans for Peace, and they're like, oh, that's great. But then they say, but, and then they go into all these reasons why peace isn't possible. That happens probably 90% of the time. So if people don't believe peace is possible, and they just think it's ideal and it's a wonderful idea, but it's not going to happen, then they're not going to work for it. And you can't really provide them ideas to move forward towards peace until you overcome this idea that peace isn't possible. And if we, the people who are supposed to be advocating for it, don't believe it's possible, then you just can't advocate in an effective way. So that's the first thing that you must do. So while I am a veteran, I am a member of Veterans for Peace. I did not come to peace movement in pursuit of resisting war. I came to the peace movement in pursuit of justice. When I got out of the military, and I had always been a kind of advocate, even in the military, I would challenge my commanders about gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people serving and having to argue with them about that. So when I got out of the military, I wanted to address issues that were impacting my community, specifically as a black person. And as I looked at things, I realized that, or it appears to me, that we're all struggling. If it's I have a sister, and I have two sisters and a mother, so I was looking at issues that impact women. And as I said, in the military, I was looking at issues that impact gay people, et cetera. I realized they were all struggling against the same monster, is what I call it. So in that case, I was looking for what's an umbrella way for that struggle, and I just came to the conclusion that peace would be the way to do that. But then September 11 happened, and I ended up in the traditional peace movement, obviously, which is, I feel, is more of an anti-war movement, and I'm looking for us to become a full-fledged peace movement. So because I believe no justice, no peace is more than a slogan, rather than an axiom or a self-evident truth, I believe working for justice is essential to working for peace. So while I know traditional peace movement activists foremost must work on issues of war, we must make wars visible and resist them. For if we don't, who will? So that's why we must do that. We must also work for peace, which means being advocates for justice. Our allies in the progressive social movements are working to achieve justice. We must join with them and, in fact, help weave a narrative that provides a vision where we are working together to achieve our vision of a just and peaceful world. So briefly, I think people think in narratives. Narratives and stories are the most influential force to motivate people to move in one direction or another. So ISIL or Daesh is very much aware of this and is using this truth to grow and gain influence. The U.S. and its allies have given ISIL plenty of story elements to build this narrative. But ISIL leaders have taken other elements, such as the idea of a caliphate, the Quran, and the camaraderie as depicted in their recruiting films, to build a vision of a new and grand future, giving meaning to its followers, most of whom feel isolated and living without meaning. Now, Daesh have committed and true believers fighting and working to bring that future into fruition no matter the cost. So I use ISIL as an example because of their spectacular success due to their effective use of a narrative in which the U.S. and its allies have done an awesome job of playing the role of antagonists in their story. But Daesh or no Daesh, what is our story? To me, it is clear we have very strong elements for our peace and justice narrative. During the past 14 years, we have seen the rise and fall of several movements: peace, immigrants, Occupy, environmental, currently the Black Lives Matter, and more, and then I have named. Each one of these movements are struggles for justice in one form or another. So how do we develop a broad spectrum movement? By weaving an all-encompassing story that communicates our goals as we struggle against a common adversary, the pursuit of greed and power, that wants to keep us separate, build walls between us, and keep us from building relationships. We must understand that the xenophobic mindset that uses immigration to galvanize political movement, fear to cause denial of Syrians to enter the U.S., preference for Christian refugees, and a registry for Muslims are the same voices that deny the legitimacy of the movement for Black lives and the need to address racism in our nation today. They are the same voices that deny the need to address climate change and beat the drums of war. And while many of us do see these connections, there are more than a few of us that on the central question of race cannot disconnect from their own fears and are trapped in historical racial inertia. Many white people on the left found great hope in the Occupy movement, which was predominantly young, white, and middle class. Undoubtedly, they saw themselves in those committed young people. Yet many of these same left activists have found it difficult to understand or support the movement for Black lives. But who represents the 99% more than Black youth whose unemployment usually runs at a rate twice as high as that of their white counterparts? Their parents, according to a March 2015 Forbes article, face a huge economic gap. The median white household income at $111,146 in wealth holdings in 2011, compared to $7,113 for the median Black household and $8,348 for the median Latino household. And earlier, one of the presenters talked about how the top so many family members altogether have more wealth than all Black households altogether. For me, this is a clear example of how racism blocks our ability to build the kind of movement we need, especially with the fact that U.S. foreign policy is most rationalized through a xenophobic lens, as our wars are predominantly waged against non-white people, and it is okay to kill people of color here at home as it is okay to kill them around the world. We must understand that we cannot have sustainable security if we do not address racism and fear of dark bodies here at home. Until it is broken, until the American racial paradigm is broken, it will be used to dehumanize people around the world. The words kraut, slant eyes, gook, sand nigger are needed to convince people to kill them. So we cannot have sustainable security if people do not believe they can have peace at home. And that was one of the ideas that was put before us earlier today. If people do not see peace in their communities, or at least a path to peace in their daily lives, how can they believe peace is possible with strangers thousands of miles away? That's just totally impossible. And as was said, if people are struggling to make it on a day-to-day basis, any issues that aren't in their face are going to recede to the background. Doesn't mean people don't care. Doesn't mean people don't want to see peace, but they just can't put the energy up to address it. So security starts at home. We must work to address peace both at home and abroad. They are inextricably linked. So is peace possible? Yes, I believe it is. Even in these times when the drumbeats of war are pounding louder and louder, I know it is possible. Humans, with all of our faults, are special in a number of ways. We can adapt to most anything by either changing our behavior or changing the environment around us, or in combination. We can even place an environment around us. No other animal could possibly go into outer space. We are also the only animal that can dream it and then make it happen. Humanity has the unique ability to recognize threats and make complex plans to address them. Disease is perhaps the best example. It took us thousands of years of cumulative knowledge, but we have become aware and done incredible things to address diseases. And war is a kind of disease. And one other thing about war, because we think, we're always talking about things in ideological and economic perspectives, and we should, but I think we also need to look to the past and understand that war in some ways is something deeper than that, because many societies in the past had a god of war, just like they had a goddess of love. So we need to learn something from that, because they didn't just do that, and it wasn't, we shouldn't look to them and say, oh, they were primitive, they didn't know, it was really about economics. We shouldn't do that, because they had knowledge that we need to learn from, right? So there's a reason why they were gods of war, because war kind of infiltrates the mind and takes over, and then people become like, it becomes like a film, and then people lose their minds, and that's what's trying to be done to us today, and we need to be aware of that and disconnect from just looking at it from an ideological, economic perspective, and look at the human aspects of that. It's very important to do that. I also believe we can take heart in our own nation's history. Though full of dark chapters, there is a torch that lights a path for us. I know it is possible because my ancestors persevered the Middle Passage, struggled through slavery and Jim Crow, and rose up through a relatively nonviolent people's movement to change relationships in this country between white and black people. And one thing that I think is important that's happening right now, at least from my perspective, the civil rights movement was successful because black people decided that they weren't going to take it anymore, that they were going to be different. And black people changed their behavior first. Then it made white people change their behavior. White people weren't going to change their behavior. Black people cannot wait for white people to change, right? Because white people are not going to change unless black people do something. And that's what's happening now. The young people in Ferguson stood up and said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to take it anymore. You can't treat us like this anymore. And then it made everybody else have to do something different. And that's what we're doing. We're saying we're not going to do it anymore, we're not going to take it anymore, and people have to react to us. It's called in the military, it's called taking the initiative and making people react to you. So that's what made the civil rights movement, in my estimation, successful as it was. And while we still have a long road, as evident by the current movement for Black lives and resistance to the change it demands, the sons and daughters of former enslaved people and their former masters to struggle for a better tomorrow for all of us. And I stand here before you and with you today as part of that struggle. We need only to look to ourselves and work to weave a vision and articulate a narrative of working together for peace and justice and living that narrative as we articulate it. So finally, at this critical moment, we must help others see that peace is possible. So I'm going to ask you to do two things, and these are things that you don't necessarily, it'd be better if you organize together to do it, but we all can do these things individually, and I think it's important too to understand that individual action and things you do in your own life in whatever sphere of influence you have can be the most powerful thing. You don't necessarily need other people to do those things. So one thing is to go talk to people and expose them to the need for a new vision and path that leads away from war and towards peace. Do not allow ISIL to cause us to hate them. And don't allow those who are trying to make us hate ISIL allow us to make us hate them. Do not allow them to become the other beyond redemption to be killed. Talk and share, not argue and not try to convince people. Just talk and share, plant seeds. And do that in places, because we're talking to the choir. There might be a few people in here that don't agree with us that came to see what we're talking about, and there might be some undercover cops in here or something like that, because we're so dangerous, and we are dangerous because we're trying to change everything, so we are dangerous. But generally we talk to the choir, and when we're standing on the street corners, you don't have a chance to really engage with people, to address their fears and really plant seeds. So we have to go and talk to people in places that we usually don't talk to people. And what I'm doing with Veterans for Peace is asking us, because I think we're uniquely positioned to do some of that as veterans, to go like to the Kiwanis Club and the Optimist Club, and to every city has its lawyers bar, association and all those things. So make a list and, call them. They're always looking for people to talk for 10, 15 minutes at their meeting because they don't have nothing to talk about. So, so go there and plant some seeds. The second thing, which I think in some ways, well, they're equally important, is to reach out to our Muslim brothers and sisters and build relationships that you might not already have. And I don't necessarily mean with, thank you. I mean, most of us probably have relationships with Muslim brothers and sisters through struggle, through struggling over Palestine and things of that nature. But take that next outer ring to brothers and sisters who are not part of the struggle and are in fear. Because we must do this before something happens here, and then we will be scrambling to show the solidarity we should have already been showing. And the thing is, look at what's happening right now, and the attack that happened 8 days ago didn't even happen here, right? So if something similar or larger or whatever happened here, things are going to get really crazy. So that's why I think it's imperative that we do the reaching out now. It is the job of activists to make the impossible possible. Politicians just work in the realm of what's possible. We make the impossible possible. That is what we do. So it is up to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Whoa. So Cole Harrison, who's the Director of Mass Peace Action, would like to say a few things.
I'm just going to say a brief word. Even though we're disappointed that Noam Chomsky couldn't speak to us today, we want to thank him for all the work he's done with our movement for so many years, and in many ways, he's such an inspirational voice and analyst that we were really I know we were all really looking forward to hearing what he had to say. I think Michael has said a lot of it, actually, but I'll just say one or two things to add. It's been a crazy week since the Paris attacks. There's been unbelievable things happening in our country. We are talking about unleashing the wiretapping once again. We are talking about, Donald Trump talked about establishing a registry for Muslims. This is a leading presidential candidate in our country, talking about creating a registry for Muslims. The House of Representatives on Thursday passed a bill by a wide margin to bar Syrian or Iraqi refugees from the United States unless one of the cabinet officials signs personally that name to be allowed in. This is in Syria, there are 4 million refugees already in other countries. I believe there's 2 million in Turkey alone from Syria. There's 5 million internally displaced in Syria. So we can't even let in a few refugees. That bill will be to the Senate next week, I guess. Of course, I don't have to tell this audience that it was the United States that destroyed the Iraqi state in 2003 and that opened up the possibility for a sectarian government that's now in place in Baghdad and that is directly responsible for the rise of ISIS and the support that it has. I don't have to tell this audience that it was the United States that collaborated in weakening the Syrian state, which it has been trying to get rid of for many decades. By encouraging our allies, both Saudi, Qatar, Turkey, and others, to arm rebels that are weakening the Syrian state. So if there's instability in the Middle East, we know many of the reasons for that lie at our own doorstep. So anyway, just to say briefly that we should take a breath, that it's going to be a long struggle, that the clouds of war are growing, and so we have just 2 small steps that we've launched already that we can take. We've launched a petition. Actually, Peace Action launched it before the Paris and Beirut attacks with a coalition of national organizations. It's on the Peace Action table over there. And I'll just briefly run down a couple of points. Significantly increase the number of Syrian refugees allowed to come to the U.S., fully fund UN refugee programs to help Syrian refugees, reject calls for a military escalation, including bombing, arms transfers, and imposition of a new fly zone. And of course, that would also include troops on the ground, to intensify efforts to implement a ceasefire, and to engage immediately in negotiations with all involved parties. including Russia and Iran, to end the Syrian civil war with a political agreement. And those negotiations have begun, as you know. And on December 10th, which is the International Day for Human Rights, that we are calling for a candlelight vigil on Boston Common to address both the refugee issue as well as the war issues. And we've called a planning meeting December 2nd, where we hope everyone will come together, bring their ideas, and help to shape this event, and hopefully we can make it bigger and broader. There's some talk about a national action as well. I believe the Peace and Planet Network has also called for national actions on December 10th in connection with the Syrian conflict. So that's all I want to bring up, is it's time to get active, it's time to step up and take a stand, and there's activities we can do. And with that,
Okay, well, thanks, Carl. So we have just a few minutes for questions, and some of the folks who are on the panel this morning have agreed to sort of step up to take part in the Q&A.
the mics are, here's one.
Oh, okay, yes, and we have,
Should have okay.
yes, we have our people who are
Microphone is.
roving microphones.
And if some of the earlier panelists are still here, if they could
And
come
would
up.
like to come up,
also.
that would be great.
I'm actually going to, I'm going to sit down.
Thank you for those inspiring words. Very inspiring. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good morning, panel and everybody here. This is an incredible workshop, and I thank you and respect you all. I just want to plant a seed for perhaps next year or some other ways to think about intersectionality and working together. A very famous PhD and author, Breeze Harper, came out of the Black Lives Movement talking about how moving to a vegan or plant-based diet is actually another piece and component of the intersectional movement, and how that affects our fellow brothers and sisters around the planet in terms of food sustainability and safety, and it also affects our environment. And for people that are so inclined, it affects our heart and our experience of empathy when we turn a blind eye to the suffering of animals that we don't actually need to do because we don't live in a climate where we need to do that. So if anybody on the panel wants to speak to that, or has heard of it, or would be open to reaching out to the plant-based community, I would love to hear from you.
Anybody want to comment about that?
Silence.
I agree with you, but I don't have any comments.
I think a lot of people don't even realize how much it takes to, energy it takes to raise meat. And also the dietary effects, and this is true with people that had been on plant-based diets, especially in other countries, that now with the introduction of imported foods and corporate restaurants that are serving things that people think they need to have, and they have never had it before, and they're transitioning, and this is hurting their food systems as well. So it's a point very well taken, and I think we could go a long way in lowering the carbon emissions by changing our habits. Plus, there's so many wonderful things we can do locally in growing vegetables. We don't have that much room for cattle ranching in Boston, but there's a lot of spaces for really good, intensive community gardens and projects like the Food Project that's growing for local markets.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to say thank you for being respectful. I'm here and I'm learning about the things that you're presenting,
Okay, yeah, and I was just going to say, I just want to move on to other people, though I appreciate your thanks.
I just wanted to say thank you for being
Yeah,
respectful.
okay, great.
Rosalie, can,
Hello. My name is Elie Yarden. I've been involved with these issues for most of my life, which is perhaps much longer than it should be. And there are two things that seemingly are unmentioned in this discussion. One of them is a papal encyclical that was directed to politicians, not to the faithful. It makes a clear relationship between the persistence of poverty and
Yeah.
climate change, and discusses both of them together. The second thing that seems to go unmentioned is the existence of a party in Massachusetts called the Green Rainbow Party. Much of what I heard here relates to that. The question of differences of income, institutional poverty in Massachusetts is a system that is maintained through legislative action. We would not have the institution of poverty, and dire poverty is the breeding ground for military action.
Thank you.
Anyone will do anything to escape poverty. I will now be silenced because I'm speaking about the Green Rainbow Party, which is the only group that is willing to assume the responsibility of state power for the benefit of everything that I've heard here.
Thank you. I'm going to go to this side of the room, and I encourage people to, this is a wonderful group of people. I know quite a few of you, and I know how engaged, we are in so many issues. So I just encourage people to direct questions to the panel and keep it kind of brief so more people can talk.
Okay, I'll be quick, but two-part. One.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Does somebody want to, what was the question? Should we be supporting the Green Rainbow Party?
The question is why the relationship between institutional poverty and what is happening in the world, war, peace, all these issues being ignored.
Oh, well. So I think maybe people didn't particularly say those words in that way, but I heard elements of that and what a lot of people said when we talked about, even myself when I talked about the. Okay, that's fine. It's for me. Once again, I think a lot of it has to do with relationships because a lot of those legislative things would be changed if we break through these boundaries that have been created and put into place between races, between classes, et cetera, and then the legislation would change. So once again, I ask people to break through the relationship barriers. So I agree with you. I don't want you to think I disagree. I just want you to know I think people have been saying what you're talking about, but maybe not in the words that you needed to hear. That's all.
Can I add just a little bit more? I totally agree with Michael that we're about building relationships too. Because once we build those relationships, we can have those conversations together. You mentioned the legislators. If we build enough people power, the legislators cease to have power. Monolithic power ceases to exist if you build enough people power. Then it's about what the people want. So I'm with you, okay?
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to suggest we may have a less than 1 minute limit to everybody's questions,
Okay.
just so we can fit more in.
Okay. Just a quick quote from Noam Chomsky I was going to ask him about. He says, quote, "The Obama administration is dedicated to increasing terrorism. As a matter of fact, it's doing it all over the world. Obama is running the biggest terrorist operation that exists, maybe in history. The drone assassination campaigns, which are just part of it, special forces operations, all of these operations, they are terror operations." And we also just had Senator Graham who said if we had released the 28 pages showing the Saudi support for terrorism, we would not have seen these attacks in Paris. So one question is the issue of impeachment of Obama. There's plenty of reasons to do it. This is one, the drone policy. Every Tuesday, he is the one who decides who to kill. But also to Mcpherson, on the question of the spiritual awakening you brought up, I do think that is the point, is getting over this paradigm of war and nation-to-nation conflict and collaborating around human progress. And that is what we see presented by China in the form of the New Silk Road, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which we've been invited to be part of. So what about the United States joining this movement for a new era of mankind? I don't know if you've heard about that, the BRICS.
Yeah, but I don't really have any specific comment on that. But only thing I would say is people, I mean, this might sound, I don't know what, but if individual people reach out to individual people to make sure that whatever these policies are really working for people, because I just don't trust governments. I don't trust China. I don't trust, United States. And
Or the media.
I'm sorry? Well, you asked me, I'm just answering the second part. So I would suggest that in order to make sure that those policies that China might be trying to put forward, that we reach out to Chinese people, so to build those relationships. And as far as President Obama and, okay, I mean, whatever, I'm saying governments, is the president of China, the president of the United States, the president of whatever, I think people need to also reach out to each other. But as far as what the United States is doing what it has been doing almost from its inception, if not from its inception, which is to expand its influence and power. And it might use different forms to do that from one moment to the next, but it's not really any different. So if you look at from the 13 colonies to the day, you can just look at the march of forts across North America and then expanding around the world. It's the same thing. The only difference between the Republicans and Democrats in that is that they use somewhat different tactics, but they're still all of them trying to achieve global domination.
Okay, thank you. I've just to cut short, we only time for one more question. Hayat?
Hello, my name is Hayat Imam, and I am a Muslim feminist, and I want to ask your indulgence to allow me a little bit of space, and I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can, to bring my voice into this space. And first, to begin with, I feel a sense of lightness and deep, deep gratitude to the voices that have gone before. And I want to thank Michael for allowing me the courage to come up to say something. And I'm going to ask you, and no, I'm going to demand from you to hear what I have to say without hearing that I am trying to justify IS. I am not, but there is something I'd like to say. I'm feeling a deep sense of grief and anger and worry that we are doing huge amounts of othering of IS. We really need to somehow, without justifying what they're doing, try to bring us back to a sense of empathy and understanding that these people are not really crazy. And I've been trying to talk to other communities which are far less safe. I'm feeling a sense of courage to be able to speak to you about this, because people just immediately think of them as barbarians and awful, and that there is no way short of war, short of decimation, to deal with them, that there's no talking to them, that they will not understand. But I urge us all to know that there are issues that they have, some of which Cole pointed out, that are making them do what they're doing. For one thing, they feel that they're under attack that they're in a state of war. So every single action that they're doing is for them, without justifying again, their sense of that this is an act of war. People keep bringing up, oh, they're beheaders and so on. But please picture for a second that man with a hood over his head and with electrodes pouring out of him, standing on a half-naked on a little bench. And if you remember that, then you remember how we would respond if that has happened to us. So just to say that I urge us all to be able to ask for negotiations. We need to push for that, short of starting the bombing campaign, which, as we all know, is not going to do anything at all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Unfortunately, our time is up for Q&A.